All right. All right, let's hear it. So we're going to spend a little time. I promise there's a reason for it. So I'm curious, what did not you say, but someone in your group say? And we're going to start with what's the effect on you as a person, hypothetically, because none of us have ever done this, right? What is hypothetically the effect on you when you say you'll do something and you won't? Guilt. Anyone say, raise your hand if someone in your group said guilt. Yeah, for sure. All right, you, guilt. Not you're guilty, but right. Guilt. Sorry. All right, what else? Broken trust. Yeah, you feel that trust has been broken, yes? Yeah. What else? So guilt, broken trust. By the way, anyone else's group say trust was an issue when that happens? Good. All right. Who else? Someone else had a hand raised. Go. Oh, gosh. Tiny first, and then Rachel, go. Yeah, you just feel bad. Anyone just feel icky on the inside? I don't know the best. But there's just that feeling inside where you just you could even shower and it's still hanging on you. Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're afraid. Anyone fearful you're going to lose your reputation? Like, do people care about what other people think of you? I hope you do, right? Like, it's a big deal. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, right? You feel just that angst from the procrastination, like, oh no, it needs to get done. You need to get done. Like, what are we going to do? All right, someone else had a hand over here. No? All right, go. Yeah, right? One of the things one of the effects on us is consequences. Not always pleasant ones. Go ahead, Becky. Okay, you should ask God direction on what to do now. Right? Because we know what our flesh wants to do. When we do something wrong, what is our first thing? Hide, right? If you have kids, if you haven't seen them for a while, you know they've done something bad, right? And they're hiding from you. Or if they're quiet, then there's something dangerous happening. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's any other interesting ones that came up, the effects on you of not doing something you said you're going to do? Shame. Yeah. I'm going to go crazy and say you might lose your job. Anyone been in a workplace with someone who never did their job? Yeah. What happens to them? They get fired. And should they get fired? Yes. Good. That's the right answer. There's not always right answers. That was one of them. All right. So I'm curious, as you flip your mind around, what is the effect on other people when we say we're going to do something and we don't do it? What's the effect on it for them? Yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's sad. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, disappointment. For sure. So sadness, let's slow down. Disappointment. I don't know how many S's there are, so good luck. What? Warning? Mourning. Worry. Sorry, I'm deaf, clearly. Worry. Yeah, worry. Absolutely. Like you're worried and fearful. Oh no, this person said they were going to do that. Like, yes. Anger. Anyone? Okay, who are my anger people? The four of us, right? Like I stubbed my toe in the middle of the night and you think there was an intruder, right? Like I get angry for no reason because there's pain, right? Because what happens when we're in pain? What do we get? Like it's incredibly painful to have someone do that, right? They're like, hey, I got this. And then not happening. Go. Upset, yes. And rightfully so. Upset. Anything else? Any other effect that it has? Go ahead. Hopeless, yeah. Especially if it's someone that you care about and it's a big deal thing. Yeah. Sometimes you feel hopeless. Go ahead, Drew. Say that one more time, sorry. Yeah, like you don't have the needs. Like you don't have your needs met. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, right? There is huge broken trust. So for those of you who experience this on a serious level, like in your marriage or at your workplace or with your children, I'm sure everyone's children never, ever didn't do something they were supposed to do. I never did that. I hope my parents aren't watching at this moment because that's definitely a lie. All right. I'm curious, what other effect does that have, not following through, have on other people? Yeah, they feel abandoned. Absolutely. Boom. Ooh, that's so good. Sorry, I was just excited. They won't believe you next time. They won't believe you next time. How quickly is trust lost? Very, like that. How quickly is trust gained? Right? Slower than me running, and that is really, really slow. No, I'm serious, right? It's lost. Does it take very much to lose trust? Like it's no work to lose trust, but to gain trust, especially after you lose it, how difficult is that? And sometimes it affects not just you and that person. Sometimes when you can go and sit down. We're going to be done now. It's my turn now. Okay. Thank you. Did you put the chalk back? No. Okay, you can keep it. Put it in your pocket. Oh, it's there. Okay. Listen, I want you to have to hold it for the next 30 minutes. Anyway, there's also a deep effect on everyone around you when you do that. Right? When trust is broken, it destroys you. It destroys the person, right, whose that trust was broken with, and it affects every single person that you come in contact with. Okay, after you deeply disappoint someone you care about, what are you thinking about? Yourself. Are you thinking about anyone else in that moment? Right? When we do something wrong, we become completely self-focused as human beings, yes? Right, that's natural, right? Because we want to fix why, because we feel so terrible. The reality is it doesn't just affect that relationships, but it makes you unable to be the person that you need to be to all the other people in your life as well, right? It sabotages relationships across the board. Right now, we're in the middle of a section on the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus is teaching us what it means to follow him. And in these 6 weeks as we work through it, Jesus is talking about the darkest and most difficult parts of our existence. And he's not just heaping rules and ethics on us. Jesus is instead bringing hope and light and a way forward in the midst of the dark and hidden parts of our human existence. In the last 4 weeks, we've worked through anger. We've worked through sexual expression and marriage. And now we turn our attention to the words that we speak and their effect on the people around us. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 to 37. I'll be reading out of the ESV, read out of what you got, and hear the word of the Lord as we wrestle with Jesus' words today. Here's what he says. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than that comes from evil. Really quick, back into your groups. I need you to get into your groups and decide what is the one main idea that Jesus is conveying in this passage. What's the one big idea that Jesus is conveying in this passage? You got your books in front of you. If not, you can grab one from underneath you. Matthew chapter 5. On your mark, you got like 40 seconds. Get set. Go. Main idea Jesus is trying to convey. Let's go. All right, game on. Let's do it. let's go. Who's taking a risk? And there is a right answer to this one, so game on. Let's do this. What is the man? Who's going to be bold and go for it? Hoyt, you had your hand up first. Let's hear it, brother. Go. Yes. Hoyt, stand up and say it loudly. Simply say yes or no. Thank you, Hoyt. And today, we're going to answer why. Jesus told us this, not because it's simple, right? Is it easy to always have your yes be yes and your no be no as a person? No. Is it incredibly difficult? Yes. Not for some of you who are like wrapped by guilt as humans and could never, ever do something. But for some of us, it is so difficult to say yes when we need to say yes, to say no when we need to say no. So we're going to spend some time breaking down why is this so difficult? Why does Jesus think this is as essential as wrestling with anger and marriage? That there's something about the words that we speak and our actions that follow through with the things that we say that are an incredibly big deal in his kingdom. Jesus in this passage is inviting us to follow him in a life of simple honesty. Now, I want to be clear real fast. Just because you think something, does it need to be said? No. So I just want to be really clear, not misconstrue what I'm about to say. Just because you think something, does it mean you have to say it? No. Right? I'm going to let you in on a secret. Does anyone care about your opinion if they don't ask for it? No. Does anyone even care a little bit? No. Do they ever care even a little bit? Like, who here was like, you know what, wakes up in the morning like, you know what I really want? Unsolicited advice. Like, you wake up like, dude, I want that so bad. It's so much fun. Right? So I want to be clear when I'm saying this. I'm not saying honesty by saying, say everything you think all the time, because not all the things you think are good. Yes? If you didn't know that, for sure all the things you think aren't good, just like me. Right? Because there's two types of people, and the two types of people are Jesus and if you think you're Jesus, you're crazy, or a liar. Either way, it's that and Jesus are the only types of people who've ever lived in this world, right? And so because of that, just because we think something doesn't mean we need to say it. I just want to give that disclaimer so people don't think they need to walk around sharing all the things that they think all the time, because you'll have no friends if you do that. Okay. So one of the things that Jesus says right at the beginning of this section of Scripture, that all of these things he's talking about will be incredibly costly for us and an incredible blessing to all the people around us, right? And so as we go through this, we have to know that that was Jesus' framing as he entered this section of Scripture, right? Jesus has taught, and I want to say, sometimes Jesus talks about something. What did Jesus spend the majority of this passage talking about? What was he talking about? It's not a trick. What's the word that's said like 7 times in the passage? Oaths, right? Right? Talk about oaths. Is this passage about oaths? No. The first passage 3 weeks ago that talked about anger, was it actually talking about anger? No, it was talking about reconciliation, about how as people, how do you become back in a right relationship with people who make you bonkers and have hurt you. And 2 weeks ago, Jesus talked about lust, but really he was talking about freedom. He used lust as an image of how we get to be free in this life. And last week, he talked about divorce, but was he teaching us about divorce? No, he's talking about marriage and the incredible blessing of marriage in his kingdom. And today, while he's talking about oaths, in reality, Jesus is asking us to live a life of integrity and honesty and using this as an image. And I'm going to say, in our modern world, like, how many people have said an oath in the last 5 years? You have. That's awesome. Right? Like it's not a major part of our world anymore, right? Right? You used to have to, back in the ancient world, you would have to promise to be part of certain groups of people. But I'm going to say it's really easy to read this passage and think, hey, I don't make oaths very often. Jesus, is it talking to me? I want you to finish this line, and then we're going to jump into teaching for a little bit. Sticks and stones will, but words will never. Okay. How many people have ever broken their arm before? Raise your hand if you've broken any bone in your body. Broken a bone in your body. How many people, that bone that you broke 10 years ago still really hurts bad today? Okay, well, you got run over by a car. Okay, well, some of you, okay, that didn't work as well as I thought. Anyway, think about, sometimes I thought that was going very differently. Anyway, think about the worst thing someone's ever said to you. What hurts more 10 years later? The words, right? When God created the earth, what did he use? Words, right? That there's something about the words that we speak that brings life or death. Jesus is hitting on something really intense and really dark inside of our human existence. That the words that we speak and the words that other people speak, and when they promise to do something and they don't, it quickly destroys us. And I'll be honest, you might have stubbed your toe last week, but you're not still thinking about it. But the person that betrayed you 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, have you forgotten? No. And could you even? No. Because some wounds don't heal fully in that. And Jesus, while using the image of an oath, is talking about the deep effects and warning us that in his kingdom, he calls us to live and act differently, and to let us know that our words and actions reverberate far beyond the people present in that moment. All right, let's start working through. Verse 33. Here's what Jesus says. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. So I get to have the incredible blessing of hanging out with the youth group kids in the morning often for Sunday school, and in the evening on Sundays. And they're like, Philip, you need a sign. And that sign should say, no, dang it. They said it last week. It says context. Does context matter? I've said, use this image. You go to Meijer, a stranger says they love you and give you a hug. What are you doing? Calling the police, right? You're creeped out, right? Right? Your child or your spouse or a family member does it. How do you feel on the inside? It's the best. When my 4-year-old just gave me a big hug and says, I love you, Dad. I'm just all right. Yep, I've got nothing, right? So context is everything. So we have to know what the world was like 2,000 years ago when Jesus spoke those words, because context, if you weren't here last week, context matters, and you should go back and listen and see why Jesus spoke in the intense way that he did. All right, so oaths were a significant part of the ancient world, and throughout the Old Testament, there are places where God calls the people to make promises, right? And Jesus right here in this passage isn't referring to a singular passage. I do not have time today to go through all of them, but I want to give you the references to the Old Testament passages if you want to look it up later this week. Here's where they're from. So he is summarizing 4 different passages here in chapter 5 as he talks about this teaching from the Pentateuch. And it's from Exodus chapter 20, verse 7. It's from Leviticus 19, verse 12. It's from Numbers 30, verse 2, and Deuteronomy 23, verse 21 to 23. I'm not going to work through that because I don't think the main point of this passage is creating a big understanding of what oaths look like. I think Jesus is teaching us what it means to speak words. And so all that to say, for 2,000 years, there has been lots of controversy in the church about this. If for the 4 of us who find that interesting, if you're interested or have some questions about it, I've got some really great resources if you want to learn more about how Christians have wrestled with the idea of what does it mean to not give oaths to anyone. We're not going to wrestle with that today, but if you are interested, I just want to make that available. So Jesus is talking about this Old Testament concept that a huge part of this Old Testament covenantal promises between God and God's people revolved around these promises to be together, right? And I want to explain a little about what it looked like. So I want to work through 34 and to 36, and then we're going to talk through what behavior Jesus is trying to correct to the original hearers of this. Here's what Jesus said. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. So in the time of Jesus, when people would promise to do something, they would promise on something else as a normative part of relationship. And at this particular time in Israel, there was a lot of frivolous oath-taking, which had a propensity and it was culturally acceptable to not to be good to your word in that respect. So in the time of Jesus, this frivolous oath-making had become incredibly common. People would say, by my life, I'll do this. Or by my head, will I do this. Or may I never see Jerusalem again if I do this. They were religious-sounding statements to try to piggyback on the faithfulness of God to convince someone that you would do something irregardless of whether you were going to actually do it or not. It's like when you're talking to someone who's in sales and they're a little pushy and they say, I promise. Like I swear it's going to be great. Right? In the ancient world, people use these words and threw them around incredibly flippantly. And secondly, there was another group. And so what you would have is people would swear oaths. And if they swore oaths by God, I want to explain what this would look like in the Old Testament. So when you were making an oath before God with another person, one of the practices that they would do is they would take an animal and they would cut it in half. They would spread it out and they would walk through the middle. And they'd say, would what happened to this animal happen to me if I break my word? Kind of intense. I've never done that when I made a promise. But there was, in that time, when people made a promise to God, they took it with that kind of seriousness. But religious folks in that point had found a really cool workaround. So instead of promising by God, they'd promise by heaven or by earth or by Jerusalem or by their head. People, and those oaths, if you made it by that, there was a cultural expectation in the day that there was nothing wrong with breaking them. So in the midst of that world, Jesus acknowledged the brokenness of the people he was with. And I'm going to ask someone who is, Hoyt, you have your Bible with you? All right, Hoyt, can you stand up and loudly read verse 37 for us? Okay. Jesus said, in the midst of that world where people made promises that they broke, I know that no one's ever experienced that here, right? But he just says, simply say yes or no. And anything more than that is rooted in evil and destruction. And I'm going to say only someone with a PhD could not understand what that means. What is Jesus telling us? What's the simple truth Jesus is telling us? Don't lie. Like, yes means what? Yes. What does no mean? Is it wrong to say no to someone if you can't actually help? No. Is it wrong to say you're going to do something and not do it? Yeah, like Jesus is saying, this is simple. In my kingdom, it's not complicated. You can just be honest. Jesus' words are simple and clear and don't need a lot of explanation. So I want to quickly just give just to acknowledge some ways in which Christians tend to hear these words and misappropriate them in their life. So I just want to quickly say, if you're working in business, is it wrong to have a contract with someone? Because it's an oath and a promise between people. Is that wrong? No. Why is that not wrong? What? Protects you and them, right? Are people perfect all the time? are they ever, are people, Paul says, I love Paul's summary of this. He says, we're really good at doing what we don't want to do, and we're terrible at doing what we want to do as humans. Like our natural state, right, is to deceive and to not follow through, right? So Jesus isn't unaware of the broken reality of human existence that he's speaking these words into. And I'm going to say, just because someone's a Christian as well, does that mean you should not ever have things written down? No, right? Because what are the two types of people, everyone? And everybody else. And because of that, are we fallen? Yeah. I'm just going to take a quick aside. I'm not excusing when someone says they'll do something and they don't. But I do want to acknowledge the reality that we are imperfect people in this. We want mercy for ourselves every single time, right? And what do we want for other people? We want justice for everyone else and mercy for ourselves. I'm not excusing that hurt, but I'm going to let you know to be in relationship with people and to be part of a community is knowing that at some point, someone will disappoint you. And that is part of life. And it doesn't excuse it. It doesn't make it okay. But we also have to go in. Jesus knows that our world is broken. He's going to go die so that we might be in relationship with one another. The cross doesn't fix all of our behaviors, but it gives hope for us to give grace in the midst of it. So I just want to take a few minutes, and I want to talk through why it's so hard for us to say yes or to say no. And I'm going to ask you to take a little risk in the hand raise. How many of you in this room have a really, really hard time saying no? Raise your hand, raise it high. It's okay, right? You're selfless. It's all right. I'm going to raise my hand at another point because I'm a terrible person, right? Right? Some of us have a really hard, you can't raise hands for other people. No raising hands. That's awesome. Just grab someone's arm and lift it up. Sorry, that was just really funny. How many of you have no issue saying no? Raise your hand if you have no issue saying no. You even sometimes find it fun. No, raise it high. It's okay. All right. Right? There are disagreeable person. Now, is it wrong to always say no to opportunities to help other people? Yes, right? Right? Jesus, his favorite name for himself and the identity that he took was as a servant. That's how Jesus built his identity. I am a servant. Right? He came as a suffering servant. Right? So it's wrong to never serve. Is it also wrong to say yes to everything even though you know there's no chance that you'll actually be able to do it? Right? Those of you who are, you know who you are right now, right? Because you just spend all day spinning your wheels feeling guilty of all the things that you wanted to do and were unable to do. And it's a miserable existence. In this moment, Jesus is giving us the keys to freedom in life. It's okay. I'm just going to give you first. It is okay to say no to someone if you can't do it. It's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. You were born as a bad person like the rest of us. It's okay, right? And for some of us, the good news from Jesus is sometimes we need to say yes to doing things because we love ourselves a little bit too much. Can I get an amen from the 6 of us? Right? No, I'm serious. It's a real thing. We're born with these great realities that are corrupted. And so I want to go through some of the reasons why we say yes or no. I think sometimes we say no when we should say yes, and say yes when we say no is because we have a lot of fear around commitment, right? And so I'm just going to quickly go on to the side. Later on in the epistles, we're going to get to it at some point in the next year and a half. Jesus sets one thing, sorry. The opposite of fear is love, right? So in the New Testament, these two words are set on opposition to one another, right? It says there's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. It's hilarious. At my wedding, That was one of our scriptures when my wife and I got married, and the person said, perfect fear casts out love, instead of perfect love casts out fear. It was true on both sides, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's a weird version you have. That's not what my version says. So some of us, right, like our yes isn't yes and our no isn't no because we're terrified of commitment, and often because we've been hurt in the past, right? Often when we're hurt, like when you hurt your ankle, what do you do when you walk? What do you have when you hurt your ankle? You have a limp, right? We have that same thing in our souls when we have experienced other people not be faithful in that, or ourselves. It causes a limp, and it affects us as we move forward. I think sometimes it's hard for our yes to be yes and our no to be no is because we're terrified of the consequences. I'm not going to ask anyone to raise your hand. Think about that time when you made a mistake at work and you said you were going to do something and you dropped the ball. Just take a moment and think about that. Right? What is that feeling like inside, hypothetically, if you've experienced that? What does it feel like inside when you experience that? You feel guilty. You feel this intense guilt. What else do you feel inside? What? Conviction and shame, right? Right? It's a terrible place to be. Sometimes we're unable for our yes to be yes and our no to be no because we're fearful of the consequences of doing what we said we were going to do and not doing the things that we said we weren't going to do. I think for some of us who grew up in families that expected perfection, this is particularly difficult, right? If you grew up in a house where there was no grace, where it was either perfection or condemnation all day long, right? Saying yes is really hard. Or you do that to yourself on the inside, right? That often, like, as we think about those moments where we've not followed through, like we are totally filled by these things. And I just want to finish off by just pondering a thought. I want to just share why it's such a big deal that we choose to follow Jesus in this area. So we're going to start with the workplace. Then we'll go to the more costly places where this applies. At work, if you're the person at work who says, I got this and never does it, what is that like for the rest of your coworkers? Everyone has to work harder. Or that person at your workplace who says they're going to do something and then tells everyone else that you didn't do it. Anyone experienced that before? Right? They try to throw you under the bus and you're not a mechanic. Right? They just try to, right? It's this heartbreaking and difficult moment. What's the first thing that's broken when folks do that? It's trust. If Jesus has placed you in your workplace or in your neighborhood to be a person that introduces people to Jesus, if our yes isn't yes and our no isn't no, is there any chance people are going to listen to us when we tell them about Jesus? There is a 0% chance, right? Because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's everything. That our inability, even with the best intentions of our yes not being yes and our no being no, breaks trust with the people around us. And when those people have questions about faith or life or their marriage is falling apart, are you going to be the person? Am I going to be the person that they run to? Right? If our yes isn't yes and our no isn't no. Jesus understands the depths of human experience in this. And in this moment, he invites you and I to just live a life of radical and simple honesty. And it's not complicated, but it's wondrous. I want you to take a moment and think as our last thing, as you think about the people that you respect most in life and the people you think most highly of. I'm going to guarantee that their yes being yes and their no being no is an essential portion of who they are. Because there's something wondrous when you see that in someone that points each of us to knowing Jesus. So I just want to encourage you, simply this week, that as you walk through your week, may your yes be yes. May our no be no. May we be known as people who people can depend on, who build trust, not break it, and be agents of God's grace and God's blessing as we follow him.